Hey y'all, hope you're well today. I'm coming to you today with a message about the heart, the human heart, and specifically how it can be exploited as well as how it was meant to be embraced and used as part of this human existence, right? So I am of the belief that we are a part of a reality that was made via intelligent design. That's my belief. And so we're going to be taking a look at some Bible verses today to take a closer look at the heart and to really understand the heart's capacity and functioning, specifically with regard how it can be exploited as well as how it can be used properly, right, to benefit ourselves and those in our lives. So I hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and let's go ahead and dive in. So, all right, the heart's capacity. I feel like we build up tolerance, right? Tolerance. We're going to talk about, how that fits here in just a minute, okay? But I feel like we build up tolerance naturally, and we do so unconsciously, okay? So if you think about for a minute, because the heart, there's a Bible verse, we're going to talk about it, where it says the heart bears all things, right? So that's kind of what I mean when I say tolerance. So if you think about walking as exercise, not just like your day-to-day walking as you're, going about your day and you're running your errands and all that. I'm talking about exercise, okay? If you think about specifically walking on a beach, that's going to build muscular strength, which is needed for resistance, right? And it's so interesting if if you've ever done this, if you have ever walked on sand, you know how difficult it can be, right? And it's so such an incredible experience because it's like a subtle kind of workout is the way I would describe it, right? It's like, you notice the ground is always shifting under your feet. I mean, the sand feels good, right? It doesn't matter if you try walking just ever so softly. It doesn't matter. It's still going to give you some resistance, right? And so you're still going to get a little bit of a workout. And that's what's incredible about going on a walk on the beach, right? So I thought this was a good analogy to bring into this conversation today, this discussion today, because I feel like it represents our interaction with someone who is manipulating us, a controlling person, a narcissist, okay? It's kind of like they're the sand. And we're trying, it doesn't matter how we approach the engagement with them, right? You're going to get entangled. It doesn't matter how. And this is just my impression from my life experiences, right? So I feel like a manipulator is like sand, right? It's intentional. That's the difference with them, right? And it's strategy. Okay, because like I said, the sand is always shifting, and it doesn't matter how you walk on it, just ever so soft, it doesn't matter. It's always going to be shifting and always providing resistance. And so you can compare that to a manipulative person. They're always contrary. It's kind of like, it doesn't matter. They could have everything in the world going for them, and they're going to be complaining, so it's they're always keeping you on your toes in that regard, right? And the mistake we can make is feeling like it's unintentional, and the wake-up call is realizing that it's not, that it's actually intentional and part of the manipulation, right? So it's just an incredible journey to go on, and lots of lessons to learn here. So instead of us getting an unintentional workout, right? If you go back to that analogy of walking on the beach, walking on sand, instead of it being, when you're engaging with someone who is a manipulator, instead of it being an unintentional workout where you're exhausted, you're depleted, it's like these people are vampires and they just suck your life force. It's exactly how it feels. And so, you wind up exhausted. But instead of approaching any kind of entanglement, or ideally you wouldn't have any kind of engagement with these people whatsoever, right? But say you have to for work, or co-parenting purposes, or I know there's all kind of different life circumstances where you have to have limited engagement with these people. If possible, I definitely believe you're going to find a lot more peace when you just surround yourself with your own kind, right? But if you are engaged with people who have shown you toxic behaviors, narcissistic tendencies, instead of that workout being one that's unintentional, and it doesn't matter how you're walking or how careful you are, you have to approach being engaged with someone like this with intelligence. It's so important. If you don't do that, then you're going to get entangled just like that, right, in their game. Okay? All right, so once we are strong enough to, and this is the way I view this, I feel like, this is just my perception, I feel like sometimes, especially if you have been involved with someone for some time, a long time, a family member, a spouse, a longtime friend, whatever it is, who's toxic, I feel like there may be a part of us within our psyche that's unconscious, that is protecting us from the shock of how traumatic it is to accept how dark some people can be, how evil people can be operating in darkness in this world. I've mentioned it before. When you look at fairy tales and fiction and just poetry and movies and all these different things, it's kind of like when you're looking at that villain, right? That scary monster-like character. It's so easy to just slap a label on that as fiction. And then I think that keeps us safeguarded, right, within our psyche by labeling all that as fiction, because then it's like we don't have the trauma of realizing that it actually can be real. And so, yeah, I think you have to get to a certain point of maturity within your psyche, of strength within your psyche, that you can metaphorically, like, dynamite this protective veil, okay, that's keeping you from truly seeing and accepting hard truths that these people with bad intentions may be very close in proximity in your life. And so that has to come first. It has to come first, right? And once that happens, at that point, I feel like we can start to deepen our understanding. And I think this happens because, at least from my experience, you start to have a desire to deepen your understanding about this reality, about the human mind and heart. You know, a lot of people, this is what prompts them to go on or to start or to deepen their spiritual journey. So I want to take a look at the part of us that gets exploited, and how that works and why, and how we can reframe that and understand that it's not a weakness, it's a strength. We just have to have that discernment and that intellectual maturity to understand that, right? So proof that love or empathy can be exploited. We can look at a Bible verse. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verse 7 says, love bears all things, it believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So if you take a look at these four things, I feel like after you've gone through, I mean, it's probably not going to really register or resonate with you if you haven't been through narcissistic or psychological abuse, but if you have, this is going to probably resonate. You're going to be shaking your head. Yeah, I get it. So when you're bearing all things, your heart, when you have when you have truth in your heart and light and goodness in your heart, right? I mean, again, we're not perfect. None of us are perfect. But when you have good intentions, you have a good heart. So this is describing how love operates literally within us, right? Through us. So we bear all things. And see, a manipulator knows this, right? And that's why they just heap on the abuse for their benefit, to get their kicks, to get their what they call supply, right? What we label as supply, which is why they're a lot of times referred to as a vampire. It's like sucking that life force from us, right? It's like, how much can we withstand? And there comes a point where, you know, if they get bored of us or feel like they've got enough supply from us, they're just going to move on. They may have multiple sources of supply, you know, but it's only those chosen people who see this bad side of a person, and then everybody else thinks this person is great, you know, or normal. I mean, they may look quote unquote normal, you know what I'm saying, with regards to just being an honest person, and, you know, looking like they're you know, capable of empathy and reciprocating in any kind of friendship or relationship, when in reality, again, those people who were chosen to supply this person, I mean, if you have had any kind of engagement with a narcissist in the past, then I don't even have to explain this. You know exactly what I'm saying. Unfortunately, I laugh, but it's really a terrible, horrible thing to go through, sometimes even life-threatening. So and I just encourage you, if you're new to learning about narcissism, this is probably not, my channel is not going to be the best for you. There's a lot of other channels out there that just really go into explaining what it is. So this is, my intention is for those who have already gone through narcissistic abuse, psychological abuse, and are a little bit further along on the healing path, right? Seeking to learn and grow themselves, right? Because that's what I'm trying to do. And I feel like you'll never stop learning and growing, right? I think that's an honorable thing, to keep that level of humility, right? So yes, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes, and endures all things. You know, it reminds me of kids who, like little kids, who sometimes act up and act out, and it's kind of like they're testing you. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you love me now? Do you still love me? And that's, you know, it's one thing if it's a child, but it's another if it's an adult, which is why sometimes these people can seem so immature. I mean, they just run around complaining that everything's not fair. They're just not willing to be responsible and accountable for their own life. But again, they portray that. They absolutely are able to portray that, sometimes like really well to the outside world. But again, you're kind of acting as that support system for them, but to the extreme. So you're bearing all things. That's what I mean. It's like the load that you're carrying for the both of you, it's too much. It's too much on one person. Over time, it's going to wear you down, right? There's just no two ways about it. So love is vulnerable. Our empathy, our heart is vulnerable because of its value. Okay, because these qualities are beautiful. They're actually beautiful, but you can see how that's just absolutely what a manipulator is going to desire, right? They're going to look at that and they're going to be like, those qualities are just delicious. Those are incredible. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can sink my teeth into those qualities. Again, going back to that reference of a vampire, right? So it's a beautiful thing when we come to the point where we realize we don't have to defend the love that we from those that we share it with. We should never have to do that, right? It's just, you know, over time, it's kind of like, again, we build up that strength where we're willing to just blast away this protective veil and face the hard truths that someone is using us, that someone is not reciprocating, that they are incapable actually of empathy and love. So turning the attention back on ourselves, which is really where I feel like it should be. I think it's normal in the early stages of healing for the focus to be externally on the controlling person, because you're trying to get a grip on your understanding. You know what I'm saying? You're just trying to make sense of things. That's normal. But once you come out of that fog, at that point, I feel like you're much better off turning that focus on yourself and refining yourself and focusing on your own growth, right? So I feel like keeping in mind the heart's capacity, right, and that it's actually vulnerable because it's so valuable and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. This is where we must develop and refine our gatekeeper or our guardian role, which I've mentioned before, the gatekeeper part of the psyche, which was referenced in that book that I just recently covered, Women Who Run with the Wolves, right? So there's a gatekeeper part of our psyche, or you may view it as a guardian type role, right? Which, this is where you may have that spiritual partnership with the Holy Spirit or your higher self, or, some form of divine guidance, the Heavenly Father, whatever lens you want to apply here, okay, as helping you to have this protective barrier. All right, so the function of the gatekeeper or the guardian role is discernment. That's the function of discernment. Here we've looked at part of the function of the heart, right, which is the center place of our love, right? The seat of where our love resides is in our heart. We have love. It bears all things, it believes all things, it hopes all things, it endures all things. So now we're getting insight into the functioning of the heart, right? Love in action. What does it mean? So then to take a look at this guardianship role, this gatekeeper role, what's the functioning of that? It's discernment, okay? So I feel like our hearts were actually designed to be tolerant of a lot, right? It's not a flaw. It's not a weakness. And narcissistic people would have us to believe that it is a weakness, but it's not. It's beautiful. And so they even use our own perceptions against us, because they flip it in that way, right? They take something true and they mirror it so it's hard to deny, but they also corrupt it, if that makes sense. So it's yes, it's like, yes, we can admit these are qualities of love, of the heart, to bear all things, believe all things, hope and endure all things. And on one hand, you can say that's a bad thing, right? It's weakness, or makes you vulnerable. But again, to flip it over here and look at those same qualities, but look at them in a beautiful light, a positive light, you have to understand that looking at them in this light over here is the truth, which means that they were designed that way on purpose. Again, intelligent design to tolerate a lot, but that's what makes your heart beautiful and valuable, right? It's on purpose. But this is where there's a key piece here, all right? I feel like all these parts of us, were meant to work in tandem. They were meant to work together. We were never meant to share our love without discernment. So, maybe we just had that part of us that was underdeveloped when we met the narcissist, right? Or maybe our parents had narcissistic tendencies or were full-blown narcissists, and so the discernment piece was never developed on purpose. They may have kept us fooled and naive on purpose, so that we never developed that discernment quality on our own, which would have matured the gatekeeper role to protect our hearts from exploitation. You see what I'm saying? So let's take a look here. All right, so we need discernment. Discernment is key, okay? As far as specifically who to share our love with. So important. And here's the thing, when you look back at those qualities, right? Love bears all things, it endures all things, hopes and believes all things, right? When you look at those qualities, Life itself brings its own challenges, right? So the heart has to bear a lot, has to endure a lot anyway, just through this reality, through this human experience here on earth, right? So how much more awesome would it be to share our heart's function and capacity with someone whose heart is aligned with ours in truth and integrity, right? Because then I feel like we can use our hearts correctly. I mean, when you're talking about another person, you know what I mean? I think that's key. That's where our discernment needs to kick in, right? As far as who we share our heart and our love with. All right, so now I want to take a look at some verses that will help us to discern the correct alignment with another. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 through 25 says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together," right? That's the reciprocity that has to take place. That tells us this is a healthy connection. You see what I'm saying? So it says, not giving up, meeting together. It's a joint effort. As some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. And all the more as you see the day approaching. All right? So this is telling us how our discernment needs to function, what things our discernment needs to look out for in another person, right? So it needs to be a person who considers how we can spur one another on toward love and good deeds, right? Not giving up, meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. If we're with somebody who's not focused on love and good deeds and working together, right? And encouraging you, then you're not equally yoked. It's not a good connection, a heart connection. You see what I'm saying? So we have to know the right things to look out for when we do connect with someone. So let's look at Philippians chapter 2, verse 4 says, "Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others." So that's the exact opposite of a narcissistic person, right? And it's funny, it's like, I start to say who's always looking out for themselves, right? And sometimes that's where you have the overt and the covert. And again, my channel is really not intended to deep dive into that topic, but sometimes these things are so subtle. And someone can, as part of their mask, try to present themselves as caring about other people. But there's subtle ways I'm learning, and I have learned, that people tell on themselves. If you just observe, if you just pay attention and see when you have been psychologically abused, it takes you a while to get your footing again, where you are not focused on your own shortcomings, because that's just part of humility. And it's really a beautiful, again, you can look at it two different ways, right? As a weakness or as a strength, right? And I think it depends on the severity, because being able to see your own shortcomings is good. It's a good thing, right? Especially through the spirit of wanting to learn and grow, through the lens of victory and not victimhood. You see what I'm saying? But if you have been psychologically abused, you may, for some time, hopefully a short time, go through a period where you're just really down on yourself, and that's the kind of thing that can put you in a danger zone, where you may actually become self-absorbed in your own victimhood and not even realize it. So we can just take this in so many different directions. Again, it's just my intent to get the wheels turning for you. So I thought that was a really good Bible verse, though, when you're looking out for who to share your love with, your heart with, right? It needs to be with someone who's not self-centered, okay? And then 1 Corinthians 13, we mentioned verse 7. before, right? Chapter 13, verse 7 before. So now I'm going to put that in context, okay? So these are qualities I feel like to look out for when you're choosing who to share your heart's capacity with. Not just your love, but the total capacity, right? Being willing to share and bear in one another's hardships as you navigate this life together and you face the hardships together. There's so many beautiful qualities that are housed in the heart. So it says love is patient and kind. So you want to look for this, because narcissistic people, no matter what kind of mask they're wearing, there's like this underlying agitation because they're so impatient, right? Because things have to go their way, but they're not openly telling you this. This is where you have to look at the subtleties, right? People call this the mask when the mask slips, but it's just so subtle. Are they patient? Are they kind? And we can all be impatient at times. You know, we're not all kind 24/7. So that's where you have to look at patterns. So, you know, your observation needs to be, you know, on the long run, not the short term, to see a person's true character, I feel like. So love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. And here's the thing with regards to that statement there, right? Rejoices with the truth. So this is where you can pull in the other verse that talks about iron sharpens iron. See, somebody who is truly humble and wants to learn and grow, I feel like nobody likes hearing their own shortcomings and faults from another person, but when it's coming from someone who has proven to you that they have a good heart and good intentions, at that point that verse kicks in. The iron sharpens iron, and it's good to hear your flaws at that point, right? Because it's to, I think the term here is edify. I could be totally wrong. I'll have to look it up, but it's for the purpose of building you up, right? And helping us to refine our character. Because again, it's just fascinating to me that the psyche can have different layers, including part that's unconscious. So sometimes it takes this outside person from a place of love to bring something from our unconscious to our conscious awareness so that we can work it out and heal it and do the work that we need to do, right, to improve ourselves. So these are qualities I feel like to look for in someone to connect with, right? And then we have Ephesians chapter 4 verse 2, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love. So here we're starting to see, I feel like, how the heart is intended to function, specifically with relation to another person with a connection, right? With all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love. So notice a common theme through these verses that I've shared today. You don't hear about, you don't hear a lot about going in on your own in isolation, right? I personally believe that this life experience is meant to be shared. Now, I'm not specifically talking about a romantic partnership. That's totally up to each one of us, right? But how much richer is life when you're up out of your house and you're engaged in reality versus when you're not? You know what I mean? And I think that stage of wanting to be alone and kind of a hermit and be in that mode of isolation is important in the beginning stages of coming out of psychological abuse, just to get your bearings and your footing and to make sense of things, right? That's very important. But at some point, you know, we want to be able to engage our hearts with our human experience. You know what I mean? Whether it's just in friendships, in work associations, just in passing, in public, you can experience and share kindness there with anybody, anytime. You know this, right? And or with a romantic partner, right? So I just thought this looking at these verses from this viewpoint gives us some perspective, right? Because the narcissistic person is going to try and spin these qualities within our heart as weaknesses. And even if they don't speak that and tell us verbally, they're showing us that through their actions, the way they treat us. That's why you wind up feeling inferior sometimes, or weak, or less than, or whatever lens you want to apply, whatever terminology. It's because they have shown you, right? They've taken beautiful qualities that are meant for great things, like we just read about. They're meant for wonderful things, right? But they've taken those qualities and corrupted the meaning and the perception, and then mirrored that back to us as a lie. Because that's what the darkness is founded on, is lies. So, yes. So notice that last verse I shared with you in Ephesians. It says, bearing with one another. So I feel like in terms of just the challenges in life, the hardships, because I opened the video talking about, life is just hard. It's just part of this experience. But I feel like we were never meant to carry the load alone. It's like just because somebody's complaining that life's not fair, or they're trying to guilt us into taking on more than our fair share of things by recounting some kind of sacrifice they've made for us, or whatever it is, right? We're given the tools for discernment, and I shared that with you there, right? And we must remember their value. So the lie is that a heart's capacity equates to weakness, but we're proving that wrong. Okay, we're proving it wrong through these verses. So I want to go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7. That I mentioned in the beginning, where love bears all things, believes all things, hopes and endures all things. If you take a look at, we're already instructed to bear all things together, first of all, in Ephesians, right? We're instructed on that part of it. So there's these 4 elements. We're instructed on the bearing all things, to do that together. Bear with one another in Ephesians. I shared that with you. On the other 3 qualities of love, of our heart, is to believe all things, hope all things, and endure all things. A narcissist is spinning it like, you need to tolerate everything I throw at you if you love me. You know what I mean? If you love me, you'll do this. If you love me, you'll put up with this and that. And again, it doesn't have to be verbal. It can be the way they're treating us. That's the message that they're sending to us. To believe all their lies. To hope. They're future faking us all the time, to endure, put up with, and tolerate all this stuff, right? But if you look at these through the lens of truth and light and goodness, I feel like these 3 qualities, to believe all things, hope all things, and endure all things, equates to elements of faith. Okay, I'm going to explain it to you. So if you're hoping and you're believing, that's not related to the present. Right? Because anything that's in your present existence, your present reality, it doesn't require proof, right? Because it just is. It already exists, right? It is its own proof. Things in your reality right now, right? In other words, there's no need to hope for or believe in something that's already there in existence. So to me, the quality of hoping for or believing in is referring to something abstract in the future. All right, so it's pointing to the future. This is my lens, okay? It's hinting towards the future. And then enduring, let's look at that. Endures all things, right? Might refer to the hardships, the challenges, the trials and tests that one must go through. Okay, now let's take a look at the etymology of the word endure. All right, this is from the online etymology dictionary. To undergo or suffer, especially without breaking. And I did an episode that's referring to a tree being strong enough to bend, right? It's a great analogy, great metaphor for endurance, right? So to make hard, specifically to be firm, solid, or steadfast. So I feel like zooming out here, because I know we were really close in. So just to zoom out and look at everything, all of these are elements needed to achieve something. Okay, why not bring in that numinous power of creativity inside of us to create a beautiful future? I feel like these are elements of creation, a part of, it's like that divine spark within us, right? That gives us the power to create our own reality. And it requires those elements of hoping for, of believing in. You got to have faith, and then you have to have the endurance piece too. Okay, so I just encourage you to think of narcissistic people, manipulators, controllers as distractions, right? The darkness in them, operating in them, is just trying to get us to forget that incredible power that we have inside. So it's there. It's meant for wonderful and beautiful things, and I just hope that this encourages you today, this message. So thanks so much for tuning in, for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.